There was no announcement, no sign, nothing. Just the dull snap of a latch sliding into place a second too early, the club's front door catching before it could open fully, and the abrupt metallic clunk made a girl near me jerk her head so fast, her hoop earring slapped her neck. Her phone slipped out of her fingers, hit the sticky concrete, and the sound was so sharp in the half-lit hallway that 3 people turned at once, too quickly, too suspiciously. The phone landed face up, screen glowing, camera app still open because she'd been trying to take a selfie. But the front lens accidentally caught the reflection in the smeared glass door instead. Not her face, not the guards, but his. V's profile, half-shadowed, caught mid-step behind the closing door. The girl didn't even pick up her phone at first. She just stared at the reflection on the screen, with her mouth slightly open, like she'd inhaled wrong. Someone behind her barked out a laugh. Too loud, too early, too stupid, and immediately choked on it, like they tried to swallow the sound back down. The guard shifted his weight, one hand already on the inside handle, pushing the door fully shut with a final rubber seal thud that made the hallway compress around us. "We're closed," he said. Not to anyone specific, not even looking at the girl who'd dropped her phone. He was looking past her, at the figure standing in the half-dark, as if pretending that he wasn't actually there would make it true. V didn't say anything. He wasn't even at the threshold, just a step behind the 2 guys he'd come with. One of them mumbled something like, "We were told." But the guard cut in before the sentence finished, not aggressive, just final. Not open to guests anymore. The hallway reacted before V did. People shifting, people pretending to look at the posters, people glancing sideways, then pretending they weren't. One guy pulling his hood up as if that would undo the recognition sparking in the air. The girl finally picked up her phone, but she did it too slow, too shaky, so the screen stayed visible long enough for others to see the accidental reflection. The unmistakable outline of V's jaw, and the slight tilt of his head, like he'd been caught mid-breath. A girl near the railing whispered something sharp to her friend, who immediately turned her back, as if that could unsee what she'd seen. Another guy mouthed, "No fucking way," without sound, but his expression dragged attention toward him anyway. Someone else fumbled with their vape and dropped it, and the clatter was too loud for how small it was. The guard kept one palm flat against the door, not pushing, not blocking, just making it clear that the barrier wasn't opening again. Behind him, the dark interior pulsed with low red light that made everything look raw, like exposed skin. V took half a step forward, not toward the door, just adjusting his footing. But that micro-movement spread through the crowd like static. A girl in a denim skirt stopped pretending to scroll and actually raised her phone, then lowered it, then raised it again, unsure which version of the moment was less dangerous. 2 boys whispered too animatedly, one glancing directly at V, the other at the guard, then at the door, then back at V like he'd discovered a glitch. The administrator, a thin man with a clipboard and an expression like he regretted coming out at all, stood to the side, waiting for something. For V to leave, for the guard to speak, for the crowd to decide what they were doing. He wasn't guiding anyone. He was just waiting, frozen in place like an overloaded cursor. The hallway hummed with wrongness, with the suffocating awareness that whatever this was, it shouldn't be happening here, not in this grimy half-lit choke point that smelled of spilled beer and industrial cleaner. Someone whispered, too loudly, "Is that?" and didn't finish, because the guard shot a look that made the word die in the speaker's throat. The doors behind him locked with a second mechanical click. Accidental or intentional, no one could tell. But the sound rippled through the group, tightening everything. A girl near the wall let out a weird, nervous giggle she immediately tried to mask as a cough. A guy dropped his keys. Someone stepped on someone else's foot. Phones appeared and disappeared. Faces twisted as if trying to rearrange themselves into something normal. And in the center of it, V just stood there, not hiding, not explaining, not performing. Just there, in a place he shouldn't be, with the wrong door closed behind him and the wrong crowd staring at him for the wrong reasons. The administrator finally inhaled like he might speak, but the breath came out thin, useless. The moment wasn't escalating. It was warping, bending into something that felt like it could snap. And everyone knew, without saying it out loud, that the first snap had already happened the second that girl's phone hit the floor and caught the reflection that wasn't supposed to exist. The administrator finally moved, but only enough to shuffle sideways, like he wanted to make space for someone who wasn't there, and the motion itself drew eyes toward him, which was the last thing he seemed to want. He clutched his clipboard tighter, fingers whitening, and mumbled something to the guard that sounded like, "Do we?" But the guard didn't respond, didn't even look at him, just kept his hand on the door, as if that was the only instruction he'd been given. V hadn't stepped back or forward, but the crowd had. subtly, crookedly, like a bunch of magnets trying to figure out where to attach. A girl with glitter under her eyes drifted closer with the fake casual sway of someone pretending she wasn't aiming for a better angle. She lifted her phone chest high, not enough to be obvious, but enough that the screen's glow reflected off her collarbone. Her friend hissed, "Don't," but she didn't lower it. Another group, 3 guys who'd been loudly joking earlier, had gone stiff, their energy collapsing inward as they realized who was standing a few meters away. One muttered, "That's not real," but the way he leaned forward contradicted every word. A boy near the coat check suddenly recognized the outline, not the face, and grabbed his girlfriend's sleeve too sharply. She snapped, "Ow!" which made a girl by the wall jump and knock over a stack of plastic cups, the clatter exploding across the hallway like an alarm. Someone gasped. Someone else laughed at the gasp. Someone shushed the laugh. It didn't matter. The damage of that sound was instant. V's companion, taller, tense, very obviously not used to being watched like this, shifted toward him, maybe to shield, maybe to speak. But the motion was read instantly as protective, which only made more heads angle toward them. Phones glimmered like insects, kept low, but not low enough. The administrator stepped forward now, tiny steps, nervous, lifting one hand half-heartedly as if he might try to usher the trio back toward the street. But he faltered when he saw how many screens were already angled their way. His voice cracked on the first syllable of "sir," and he shut his mouth again, swallowing it like a mistake. A girl near the entrance tried to pretend she wasn't staring by turning to a poster on the wall, but her phone wasn't even locked, and the front camera was still pointed backward, catching the reflection of V's silhouette in the smeared glass. A boy saw this and immediately elbowed his friend, who elbowed another, creating a chain of jerks and half-turns that made the whole group look like it was glitching. One of them whispered V's name, not loudly, not confidently, just enough for 2 people to hear and react. The reaction was wrong, too sharp, too eager, too unfiltered. Someone's breath hitched like they'd been caught doing something inappropriate. Someone else muttered, "No way, no way," under their breath, repeating it until it sounded like static. The guard finally lifted his other hand, slow, controlled, but not reassuring, and placed it against the frame, as if to reinforce the closed door with his body. The hallway tightened again. A girl squeezed past, trying to leave, but misjudged the space and bumped straight into the tall companion. The collision wasn't hard, but the contact was enough to make her yelp high and panicked, dropping her lipstick, which rolled directly to V's shoe. For a second, she just stared at it, unmoving, like bending to pick it up would mean acknowledging what she'd touched. Her friend grabbed her arm and pulled. Too rough, too conspicuous. They retreated without the lipstick. Phones rose a little higher now. Not fully raised, never bold, but emboldened. A man in a blazer approached from behind the crowd, like he belonged to the place, walking with the authority of someone here every night. But when he saw V, he stalled mid-step, mouth opening, then closing like he'd forgotten how to speak. He looked at the guard, then at the door, then at V, then at the administrator, as if someone else should fix this, because clearly he wasn't going to. A girl whispered, "He's not supposed to be here." A repeat of part 1, but sharper now, more certain. A guy near the wall said "shit" under his breath, like it was a prayer, and V, who hadn't been acknowledged directly by anyone in the room, was now the center, unwilling, unmoving, unavoidable. The tension wasn't rising. It was rotating, locking people into place, forcing every reaction to ricochet off someone else. What began as an accident with a dropped phone had turned the hallway into an engine, and it was running hot now, grinding, unstable, waiting for the next wrong sound to push it past the point of no return. Someone tried to undo the moment by forcing normalcy back into the hallway. A guy in a leather jacket, drunk enough to believe confidence could fix anything, swaggered in from outside and clapped his hands once, loud, the sound ricocheting off the walls like a cheap firecracker. "Yo, what's the holdup?" he said, grinning at no one in particular. But the second he saw V, the grin evaporated so fast it looked like a glitch, his mouth hanging open mid-curl. He froze, blinked twice, then tried to pretend he hadn't reacted at all, but the stumble was already public. A girl near him snorted, not amusement, just a reflex, and slapped her hand over her mouth, eyes wide, as if that could reverse what she'd done. Her boyfriend hissed, "Stop," but he said it too loudly, too harshly, and the couple beside them flinched. The administrator tried again to speak, lifting his clipboard like a shield, but someone's ringtone went off, high-pitched, cheerful, aggressively out of place, and the sound cut him off mid-breath. The owner scrambled for their pocket, dropping their charger cable, which swung and hit a girl's thigh. making her yelp. People murmured apologies that collided with each other in the air, messy, overlapping. Someone stepped on someone's shoe, someone backed into a wall, someone muttered, "Oh my God," too audibly. And through all of it, V remained still, but the stillness now felt like pressure, like everyone else had to keep motionless out of some instinct they didn't understand. A boy near the door lifted his phone, then lowered it, then lifted it again, unable to commit to either decision, his breathing visible in the jitter of the frame. Two girls argued in whispers. "Don't film." "I'm not filming." "Then what are you doing?" "I don't know." They weren't lying. No one knew. A couple who had been heading inside moments earlier now found themselves pinned in place, pretending to check the time, even though neither of them had notifications. The guy in the blazer took a step backward, but bumped into someone shorter, who let out a startled, "Hey!" that drew too much attention. Immediately he looked around, panicked, as if realizing he'd spoken in a forbidden register. A security staffer deeper inside the club cracked open the door 3 centimeters, just enough to peek out, eyes wide and uncomprehending, before someone from behind yanked him back in. The door shut again, harder this time, making several people jump. The hallway shook with micro-reactions, shifts of weight, stuttered inhales, aborted gestures. A girl holding a drink suddenly dropped the straw, the tiny plastic piece hitting the ground with an absurdly tiny tap. But because everyone was wound too tight, 3 people turned toward the sound, as if expecting something worse. A boy near the wall whispered V's name, not boldly, just barely audible. But someone heard him and shushed him like a teacher catching a child. The boy's cheeks flushed bright red. He shoved his phone into his pocket too aggressively, hitting the corner of the wall and dropping it again. This time the crack was real. He cursed under his breath, then immediately froze, aware of how the curse had sounded in the compressed space. The administrator finally squeezed out a shaky, "Gentlemen, maybe step." But he was drowned out by the squeal of the front door's hinges as a new pair of girls pushed in from outside, laughing too loudly, mid-conversation, until they saw the hallway. The laugh died in both their throats at once. One of them instinctively raised her hand to cover her mouth, and her freshly painted nails trembled. The other grabbed her wrist, like she was physically stopping her from doing something dangerous. Wait, is that?" she whispered. But the whisper came out cutting, slicing through the mutters. People shifted their attention toward her, then toward him, then toward the guard, then back at her again. The panic of possibly being the one who said too much flickered across her face. She backed into her friend, stumbling. And then, as if the hallway had been holding its breath, someone finally broke and lifted their phone fully. No halfway angles, no pretending. Just raised it, openly, directly at V. The act was so stark, so irreversible, that the administrator visibly winced, the guard's jaw tightened, and half the crowd collectively twitched. The phone's tiny red recording dot blinked once, sharp and merciless, and the moment changed shape right in front of everyone, shifting from awkward confusion into something else entirely, something that couldn't be walked back, couldn't be smoothed over, couldn't be ignored. V didn't react, but everyone else did. Phones rose like a delayed reflex, like a system syncing to a new default. People whispered in broken fragments, "Oh God, no. Why here? This is..." But no one knew the ending to any of those sentences. The man in the blazer muttered, "This is going to be bad," not predicting, just stating the obvious. And now, the hallway wasn't a hallway anymore. It was a trap, with one exit sealed by a guard's palm and the other clogged by a growing cluster of people who couldn't decide whether they wanted to flee or witness the impossible thing they'd been handed by accident. V's presence wasn't the problem. The problem was that he'd been stopped here, in this place, with these lighting conditions, with these witnesses. And no one, not him, not the guard, not the administrator, not the people clutching their phones, knew what to do next. The first person who tried to leave did it too obviously. A girl in a white mini dress, eyes wide, elbows tucked in, shuffling sideways like she was sneaking past a sleeping dog. But the second she reached the door, the guard blocked her with just a shift of his shoulder, not even touching her, and she recoiled so sharply, she hit the wall with a soft thud that made everyone stare at her instead of V for a split second. Her friend grabbed her arm and whispered, "Just go." But they were trapped behind 2 guys who drifted forward without realizing it, forming a clumsy blockade. One of them turned his head, saw V again, and blurted, "Shit, that is him," too loud, too exposed, and immediately tried to bury the words behind a cough that fooled no one. A girl near the drinks cart gasped and dropped her half-finished cup. The ice scattered across the floor in messy shards, skittering under people's shoes. making the hallway erupt in tiny jerky movements as everyone tried not to slip. The administrator finally snapped, quietly, desperately, "Please don't crowd." But the plea only made people lean in more, like they needed proof of how close they could get. Someone's hand brushed V's sleeve, not a fan, just a stranger shoved by the tightening space, and the contact sent a ripple through the hallway so fast it felt electric. Phones rose again, faster this time, angles sharper, boldness blooming in the panic. A boy near the wall whispered, "Why is he here?" And the girl beside him said, "No, seriously, why here?" As if the location itself was an accusation. Someone at the back tried to laugh it off. Maybe it's not that deep. But the laugh broke halfway, thin and brittle, and only made the tension heavier. The guard pressed his palm harder to the door. The door didn't move. V's companion tried to speak again, but the words barely left his mouth before a girl cut in with a shaky, "Too high. Don't touch him." Even though no one was touching him. It was chaos without volume. Small collisions, broken whispers, camera glow on damp walls. Ugly, cramped, unavoidable. And the awful part was that no one knew whether they were witnessing something they should hide or something they wanted to capture before anyone else got the angle. The line between those instincts kept flickering, unstable, pulling the crowd tighter, closer, wronger with every second. The moment everything snapped wasn't dramatic, just a slip of instinct, a stupid half-second choice. A guy near the back, who'd been pretending to tie his shoe for minutes, suddenly lunged upward with his phone raised high. Not sneaky this time, but triumphant, as if he'd finally convinced himself he had the right to capture whatever this was. The crowd reacted instantly, not with screams, but with an ugly, collective lurch. People pushing forward, people pulling back, people grabbing friends, strangers, anyone within reach. Someone's elbow hit a girl's cheek. She yelped and dropped her phone, which shattered, the crack loud enough to make V's companion flinch for the first time. The administrator lost control completely. His clipboard fell, paper scattering like weak confetti, stepped on, smeared, forgotten. The guard barked, "Back up," but no one did. They just shifted wrong, bodies overlapping, the hallway choking with limbs and screens in heat. A girl pressed against the wall cried out, "Move! Move!" But the command dissolved into the mess. V was no longer visible cleanly, just fragments of him caught between shoulders and phones. A jawline here, a sleeve there, a shadow boxed in by panic. Someone shouted his name. Not a question, not admiration, just a raw stab of sound. And immediately 10 more phones rose, clattering against each other as people fought for angles they couldn't even see. The door behind the guard rattled once, like someone inside tried to open it and then changed their mind. A guy shoved forward for a better shot, tripped, grabbed at anything to steady himself, and his hand landed on V's arm. Not a gentle touch, not violent, just wrong. The hallway convulsed. People gasped, cursed, ducked, lifted their phones higher. Someone yelled, "Stop!" But it was swallowed by the metallic snap of another flash. By the time the guard forced himself between bodies, pushing back with both arms, it didn't matter. The moment was already torn open, irreversible, leaking into every phone that had managed to record even a glimpse. The crowd loosened, not because anything resolved, but because the excitement had curdled into something sour. Regret, thrill, fear, hunger, all tangled. V didn't run. He didn't speak. He didn't even look back as his team finally carved a path through the mess. But the last thing anyone saw before he disappeared into the dark was the reflection of all those screens in his eyes. Tiny, shaking, merciless squares, capturing a place he should never have been, surrounded by people who weren't supposed to see him there. Each recording sharpening the same question that would explode the moment the footage hit the first group chat. What the hell were they doing in that place?